Hello, and welcome to this week's Movie Math, where we must solve the case of the dead box office. Yes, it had seemed like once again it was full of life, only for it to have the bottom fall out of it. And it's Kenneth Branagh's fault, because his Hercule Poirot was never going to save the day. I kind of liked the movie, but as I asked you last Sunday, does anybody feel these movies are, This and Dumb Money are worth seeing in theaters? I suspected the answer was no, and it turned out that I was correct. Who do you think killed the box office this weekend? Because it is lying dead on the floor. This was the second worst weekend of the year. Oh, well, what was the worst? Well, that was Super Bowl weekend, where, of course, audiences are distracted by another entertainment option. But these days, as we've been discussing, things are about to get bleak. Get ready. Some of you will love it. Some of you are eager to dance on Hollywood's grave. But I think Hollywood will survive, but I don't know what kind of a Frankenstein monster it's going to look like. But anyway, movies are no longer the only game in town every single weekend. I mean, there's not like a Super Bowl level distraction, but I guess when maybe you add all the distractions together, perhaps they are Super Bowl level. Ooh, there is a ton of recent content on digital and streaming. There is even more older content on digital and streaming. And now there are other things coming into the space like video games that come out regularly and are becoming more mainstream than ever. I think largely also thanks to social media. Video game companies, I wonder if the studios will pick up on this. Video game companies have their own little Comic-Cons like every couple of months, like Nintendo Direct and the PlayStation presentations. I see them getting more. Also there's a strike going on, but we're talking about video games more than we're talking about movies and television. And that's all thanks to the video game companies getting out there and tooting their own horn. Tooty toot toot, my friend. So, for instance, not only does a video game, like this weekend Mortal Kombat came out early release for those who pre-ordered the game, not only do you get hours upon hours of playtime, but inside, there's a 4-hour movie, which some fans watch alone because it's uploaded to YouTube by various accounts. And some of those, some of the Mortal Kombat movie uploads have over 1 million views. I think there's 2 of them that have over 1 million views. And, there's billions of people on the face of the earth and maybe 400 million in the North American box office region. But not very many people go to the movies. I mean, a movie would kill to have 1 million tickets sold. That's just the reality of the business. So that's definitely eating into that. They're all in the same pot all of a sudden. And Spider-Man 2 is coming up in October, which I think will have a similar effect. So while studios for decades have relied on a captive audience, what else are you going to do this weekend? Now they have to make an aggressive argument as to why you should go to the multiplex for a higher price point and likely a worse experience rather than simply waiting for digital or streaming. And in some cases, you don't have to wait very long. Although the pandemic has made many of you more, you've learned to wait. And then also, if something isn't spoiler heavy, what's going to happen? Who's going to ruin A Haunting in Venice or Dumb Money for you? You can wait. So A Haunting in Venice and Dumb Money. As I said last weekend, I didn't think anybody would want to see these in theaters, and I was correct. A Haunting in Venice opened on par with Death on the Nile, which was a real clunker. I think A Haunting in Venice is better. Although nobody seems to really love any of these Hercule Poirot movies. The audience scores are not great, even though A Haunting in Venice does have the best ones. And Dumb Money, had a very low per theater average for a supposed hot awards contender. This thing just totally imploded this weekend. And as we've also been discussing, even the movies that do open bigger, around 30 million, that's nice, they fall faster. Because after that big opening weekend and positive word of mouth, audiences bookmark the film for digital or streaming just shortly down the road, rather than heading out to see the film in theaters in the second, third, or fourth weekends. Pretty much everybody goes to a movie first weekend. We saw that happen with The Equalizer 3. Now it's happening with The Nun 2. So of this top 10, let's play a little game. Of this top 10, how many of these movies did you see in theaters? How many are you waiting for digital streaming? And how many will you simply not see at all? Because I suspect that you will actually see almost all of these movies, but the vast majority on digital and streaming. And separate digital and streaming. Which ones would you be willing to pay about $20 to $25 for on digital? And which will you wait to watch at no extra cost? But I bet, for instance, you'll see Gran Turismo was great. You'll see Gran Turismo at some point, but I bet on that one a lot of you wait for streaming at no extra cost. Depends how desperate you are. But $20, you own the movie then too. And I think even though that's more than a movie ticket in a lot of parts of the country, I think the ownership element helps to make people feel that's a better purchase, better use of their money. And of course, as many of you are pointing out, the economy ain't doing so great right now. So that's a factor as well. So as a result, the century mark used to be the norm for domestic releases. Most movies, if they had anything going for them, would be able to hit 100 million. But now it's become the exception. This year, only 18 movies have crossed the century mark so far. And look at the past couple of years. You can see a real difference pre and post pandemic. There were around over 30 movies. Hollywood was really cooking right before the pandemic. It was going so well, which was probably why they felt they could launch subscription video on demand services, because they were like, we can do no wrong. We're just printing money over here. But now, the works have been gummed up big time, and they did it to themselves. But wow, such a, that century mark, that really just, I think, paints a really clear picture. So as we've been discussing on the live streams, and some of you didn't like hearing this, but I believe it's true. My theory is that Hollywood will not be able to survive until it gets rid of SVOD, which is subscription video on demand, where you pay one low monthly price for a bottomless pit of content. In fact, Warner Brothers Discovery CFO recently publicly stated that Hollywood is giving away content for way too cheap. And I'm not surprised that you would be upset that they would be threatening to take that away. But from a business perspective, he ain't wrong. I mean, it's just not sustainable. And we're not just talking about residuals, by the way, that there isn't enough money coming in to divide up amongst all the talent for all the content, because it's a one low price. But Hollywood is underselling themselves. It's their SVOD services that are keeping you from buying tickets to their movies. It's friendly fire of the worst kind. So basically, after the studios get done fighting with talent, and I'm not quite sure how they're going to resolve it if they haven't done away with SVOD, because there's just not going to be enough money coming in for them to have a deal that they feel comfortable with. But at some point, they're going to start fighting with you. It's going to be brutal as they rip away the cheap IV of SVOD right into your veins, but they just can't do it. And likely go to an a la carte system, or they could raise the subscription price to such a ridiculous degree. I was thinking about this actually yesterday. I was going through and putting movies on the subscription services on my lists. And I was like, wow, I was on Hulu. Hulu or Max, I was on both of them, but I was like, you could just have this one streaming service and it would pretty much meet all your entertainment needs to a degree. What's your main SVOD service? So I could see a point where everybody just goes, okay, we got to pick one or two, and that's just it. And then we just stay to those. And maybe if a show's really amazing, we'll churn for a month or two, which is why some of you said you binge, not only because you prefer it, but because, when the show extends over a month, you're not paying for that. So you wait till you can watch it within the 1 month price. So people are doing that rather than watching something based on how they would enjoy it the most, because they would enjoy it the most for the least amount of money. That you would be surprised how that would contribute to someone's enjoyment of content. But yeah, so I think that so I think you could just have one, and so I think they're going to raise the prices to SVOD to a point where it becomes unsustainable. And then once they've broken you that way, then they'll start doing the a la carte. They'll go, oh, you don't even have to churn. That makes sense. You don't even have to churn. Just come over here and pay for season 2 of House of the Dragon, or 3 or 4 by the time this happens. And then you'll be like, okay. So you can have that kind of a situation. Some of you in the live stream said maybe they could do sales or discounts on bulk purchases. You buy 4 series, you get a discount, right? Or they could charge just for newer releases, the new expensive content, while the older content, which doesn't cost them anything to have on the service, but keeps you subscribed overall, could be part of what's included in the base price. Like Comixology does that for comic books. You have to pay for new releases, but if you want to read older comics, it's really great for catching up on trades, stuff like that. Those are included with your, I think it's like $6 a month. I love Comixology. All right. But still, even with the libraries that are available for the subscription cost, expect them to be smaller and rotate that older content, being more like the Disney Vault once was. I'm all for Disney Plus going back to having the Disney Vault, because once I was drunk on watching all the content that I could whenever I wanted to, now I'm kind of tired of it. I'm like, well, I've watched Sleeping Beauty so many times, I don't think I can do it again. I need a break. They have to force me to take a break. So not a bad idea. So try to look through your hate and anger at the idea of having SVOD taken away and put on your business hat, and what would you suggest? Now, sure, Barbie and Oppenheimer did great, but Hollywood cannot be a robust business on Barbies and Oppenheimers alone. I mean, they're lightning in a bottle. They don't come along all the time, and even when they do, they don't come out every weekend. Hollywood has to have different levels of movies to work. Now, how does Netflix survive? What the heck? How is Netflix able to do this while everybody else is drowning? Well, one day it will happen. Netflix will stop having subscriber growth. In fact, they almost had that experience. It happened very briefly, as you might recall, about a year or so ago, which is why they cracked down on password sharing to get the numbers to start growing again. That's why they did that. Their stock took a huge hit, and since many of their employees at Netflix are partially paid with stock, that's how they lured a lot of them away from the studios. They said, oh, we'll pay you, but then also you'll get stock options. Well, when that stock started to do poorly, everyone at Netflix started to freak out. It was a real problem. Their annual salary started to really go down because they're tied to the performance of the company. But also, beyond their weird pay structure, Netflix just puts content on Netflix. That's all that they do. They don't own anything else. They don't make anything else. They don't make a physical product. Whereas Hollywood studios, all the other Hollywood studios, have robust, complex, intricate businesses. So that's a big part of the issue as well. We don't really have a model of a streaming service like Netflix, which is another streaming service that's all they do. Maybe someone could start a streaming service that was just like Netflix, that had no other things that they were obliged to do. And we could see if someone could build another pure Netflix, but the studios just have too many strings attached. Some feel that as content gets watered down and spread out, you need these huge behemoths to arise to be able to take on the financial burden and risk, so that no longer does the company live or die by its content because it has so many other streams of revenue, et cetera, right? Which is why some feel, because, still the studios are content driven. So some people feel Apple will buy Disney, Amazon will buy Paramount, and Warner Brothers Discovery and NBC Comcast Universal could combine as one. I hate this idea, but let's just see what happens. Some have said that by letting tech into Hollywood in the first place, that is what was truly killed the artistry of the business, replaced by analytics and AI, where movies and TV have simply become content. That was very interesting to me. That the thinking of the tech industry is not compatible with the thinking of Hollywood, which is a very special business. Go watch The Offer, which aired on Paramount Plus, that nobody watched, just like nobody watched Winning Time. These are great business shows about the business of entertainment and the business of sports. They're fascinating. But, technology, that kind of school of thought is very different. And perhaps, they just don't work together. We'll see. But that's not to say there won't be some bright spots here and there. Great content is coming out now. We're still getting big hits. But what it does seem the problem will be is that there will be less opportunity for talent. There will be, less chances things will still hit, but the pool of what might hit will be smaller because, as I said, there will be less opportunity, which is worrisome because how are you going to develop new talent, the next generation of talent? And that's why the writers and actors are striking. They are fighting to retain the human element of Hollywood as the tech industry threatens to make it totally AI. They started out, everybody thought it was funny that they had AI make development decisions, but look where we are now. And would AI have ever greenlit Barbie or Oppenheimer? What about that studio executive like Robert Evans, who has that gut feeling and takes a risk and is rewarded for it? How is that going to happen with this new setup? The only way you can do it is if you have a big name talent like Scorsese or Nolan, or I guess to some degree Margot Robbie, who vouched for Barbie, who say they believe in this and they're going to put their star power behind it. But how do you create more Scorseses and Nolans and Margot Robbies if this is the case? So bleak, so bleak. All right, now let's talk specifics for this weekend's box office. Did Kenneth Branagh even really try? I mean, that's what I would ask him if I was his agent. I'd be like, let's Monday morning quarterback this thing, Kenny, and let's try not to make these same mistakes going forward. I think maybe he needs a new agent. But who did he think was going to come out for a movie with such little star power? I know that Michelle Yeoh just won an Oscar, but I think she still doesn't sell tickets, particularly, in the North American box office, which is horrible. I'm not saying it's right, but I'm saying it's what is. Now, some of the trades have mused that if only Challengers had opened this weekend as it was supposed to, it was pushed to 2024 because of the strikes, and that perhaps Zendaya might have been able to power that sexy sports movie to #1, especially against such weak competition. And she might have been able to do it indeed, and she might have even been able to have done it without promoting it. That movie maybe could have come out this weekend. But, again, hindsight is 2020. I can see why MGM would not want to release the movie without Zendaya being able to promote it, because she is just such a big star. As much money as it could make without her, I think it would certainly make more money with her. But that is an interesting, what if Challengers had opened this weekend. It would be very nice for Zendaya to have a #1. And I don't know if in April she'll be able to do it. This could have been a slight missed opportunity. All right, so A Haunting in Venice skewed 53% Caucasian. And some of you have said, well, The Nun 2 skewed 43% Latina. Why was that not an issue, but this is? Well, I think that audiences of color really do drive the box office a lot these days, and they can really supercharge it. I mean, there are a couple of examples, like, let's say, Top Gun Maverick, which is but Top Gun Maverick still appealed to everyone, even though I think there's a certain audience, Caucasian conservative, that really did push that film. But anyway, A Haunting in Venice has a very low box office. This is a very small number, so it needed more people, and it just didn't have enough crossover appeal. Now, thankfully, the movie was extremely inexpensive to make, and it should be okay from a financial standpoint once it trickles down to digital and streaming. Certainly, Disney will rush it to digital and maybe even get it to Hulu in time for Halloween. This is such a low opening. They should just start moving it along. I would do a 17-day window on this for sure, to digital, and then it would probably be able to hit Hulu just in time for Halloween. And also, they don't want to undercut Haunted Mansion, which is their big digital play already for Halloween. But will Disney greenlight any more, Kenneth Branagh Poirot movies? Unlikely! Branagh had a respectable commercial run for a little while there, although he's been faltering for a while. But considering that Belfast is his best received film in years, although I did not care for it, as I told you in my Haunting in Venice review, I turned it off. But it did get a lot of Oscar nominations. Some people really liked it. So he might want to go back to the smaller films that first put him on the map. There's a lot of Shakespeare that he never adapted. What about Othello or The Merchant of Venice? If I were his agent or his new agent, I would be like, let's go back to Shakespeare. His Henry V speech is still one of the best speeches of all time. Really incredible. But, does anybody remember classic movies anymore? It's so sad. That's another thing that streaming and digital has really hurt. Nobody, and also the fall of Turner Classic Movies, that brand. Nobody seems to know the classics anymore. It's really sad. All right, so, as for Dumb Money, I think a slow rollout was a mistake. This movie doesn't go wide until the end of the month. At that rate, if you've already had to wait so long to see it, why not just wait for digital or streaming at that point? Paul Dano, Seth Rogen, Pete Davidson, America Ferrera, Shailene Woodley, all talented, likable actors, but not one of them can sell a movie ticket. Even Seth Rogen, who I think might have Dwayne Johnsoned himself by being a little too overexposed. But really, who's going to see Dumb Money in theaters? Unless it's playing like at your favorite theater and it's a really convenient time. But I don't think it's like a rush. What's worse, such a poor per theater average is really going to undercut Dumb Money's awards chances, because it doesn't seem like a hot awards movie anymore, does it? It might have gone out too early as other awards contenders start to just pick up steam now. For instance, American Fiction, a movie that came out of absolutely nowhere, just took home the Toronto Film Festival's People's Choice Award, which is considered a very strong predictor of the Best Picture Oscar winner, but certainly a nominee. So that's fantastic for American Fiction. Jeffrey Wright, is it finally his time to get is this going to be his J.K. Simmons moment where he finally gets his Oscar? Working actor? And with Alexander Payne, by the way, this is surprising considering the scandal that still you would think would haunt him still. But Alexander Payne's The Holdovers was runner-up, so that could be a very strong contender. Probably not for Alexander Payne, but maybe for everybody else involved with the film. As for the rest of the top 10, The Nun 2 managed to just barely hold on to first place in its second weekend, yet is only now about where the first film opened. Yet still, for as cheap as A Haunting in Venice was to make, The Nun 2 was even cheaper, which is why Hollywood sure loves horror. The Equalizer 3 stopped the bleeding a bit in its third weekend, but it's still going to have to work really hard to hit the century mark, if it even can domestic. Barbie, which is continuing its world domination tour on digital, has now surpassed the Avengers on the all-time domestic chart and Avengers Age of Ultron on the all-time worldwide chart. Greta Gerwig and Margot Robbie's out-of-left-field swing has made Warner Brothers Discovery and Mattel tons of cash, but really painted them in a corner as to how they could possibly build out this franchise. Could Greta Gerwig be Mattel's Kevin Feige? Because I was like, maybe we should ask Greta Gerwig what she would do. Because she came up with amazing stuff for this movie that no one would ever think of. I was watching a lot of the behind-the-scenes extras because, we did our watch-along, so I own the movie. We did our watch-along on Tuesday, so I was watching some of the extras this weekend, and she just has these really great, wonderful, and a lot of them from classic movies, by the way. Greta Gerwig knows her film history, and you should too. I think it's incredible how important that was to her being able to have this success, that she built it on the shoulders of other great cinema, as all filmmakers do. But anyway, I don't think she wants to make Barbie content for the rest of her life. That's the problem. Kevin Feige is an executive. He's a suit. It's almost impossible to get a creative to become a suit. Look at James Gunn. It's very hard. You got to look for a producer who has that love of the material. Maybe Margot Robbie's production company, but I feel a lot of it is Greta Gerwig, to be honest with you. But anyway, Greta Gerwig is now set to head over to Netflix to adapt the Narnia books. But considering the strong religious aspects of that property, she might want to reconsider Narnia, because I don't know if her out-of-the-box thinking will be appreciated by the audience that is interested in Narnia movies. All right, I love everything Greta Gerwig does. I thought her Little Women was perfect, and I have no doubt that she would be able to deliver a Narnia that I would find captivating. But you don't want anybody rallying and campaigning against your work. So I don't really know if Narnia is the sandbox for her. All right, and someone should bring this up to her. As for Oppenheimer, it has now passed $900 million at the worldwide box office, but I still don't think it's going to make $1 billion. But who cares? So many flowers for this movie. It has passed Bohemian Rhapsody to become the most successful biopic of all time, and it is the second highest grossing R-rated movie of all time behind Joker. And this means that Christopher Nolan, he's successfully switched studios. He's no longer beholden to a studio. This means he can work anywhere he wants. And he has a tremendous amount of capital to spend. But it seems it's still not enough to get him the only other thing he's always wanted besides an Oscar, and that's Bond. As myself and other scoopers are hearing that Matthew Vaughn is the first choice for that gig because he has a lighter touch and he's more of a team player. Maybe Christopher Nolan shouldn't have said he needed to have complete creative control. Oopsie. All right. So over to streaming, starting with Nielsen for mid-August. Again, we still have not caught up to the release of Ahsoka, One Piece, or The Little Mermaid on Disney+, because Nielsen takes forever to release their numbers. They're always about a month behind. But we'll hit Ahsoka. We'll start to hit those things next week, thankfully. So this week, Suits has dipped below 3,000, but it's still king, followed by Painkiller, which rose to second place in its first full week on these charts. I can't believe how well Painkiller is doing, considering it's the exact same story as Dopesick. I still feel Justice for Love and Death, which nobody watched. I mean, is it Elizabeth Olsen? I mean, that's scary. That's a scary thought. And Heart of Stone has held, which is why I continue to think that Gal Gadot's future is likely at Netflix. And while neither Johnny Depp nor Amber Heard can get any legit new work, people are still interested in their personal drama. On the originals chart, while it wasn't enough to get them on the overall chart, Only Murders is still doing pretty good as it continues to kick off its third season. It's early days for its third season on these charts, because again, we're a month behind. Hulu also managed to get their animated show Solar Opposites on here as well. But this chart, as you can see, is almost entirely Netflix, with neither Disney Plus nor Max able to get a single show on the OG chart. And look how low the bar is, proving that Netflix is still the Coca-Cola of streaming, and this is likely another reason for their success while the other subscription video on-demand services struggle because Netflix has very little churn. They've got stuff for you to watch. Even if they spread their audience out, they're still holding on to them. Over on the movies chart, speaking of Netflix, they have that deal with Sony because Sony doesn't have their own streaming service, and they get all of Sony's movies, and The Pope's Exorcist just hit and once again delivered in the Sony Netflix deal. On Netflix's own charts, wow, and this is for just last week, expect Adams, because they're their own numbers, expect Adam Sandler to produce a new movie or series for his daughter because her movie is still #1 on the service in its 3rd week. Wow, that Nepo baby is launched. And while nobody seemed to like that choose-your-own-adventure romantic comedy, everybody still seems to be hate-clicking through it. Did you break down and give it a whirl? And then Heart of Stone is still hanging on here on this chart where it's at 5 weeks out. With shows, we see the first full week for One Piece. Last week it came out midweek, so we were hoping that maybe it would blow up this week. It did not, but it did hold steady. But it's fine. And while it's not a sensation, it's still so strong and has such strong online social media presence that it's already been renewed for more content. So that's very exciting. And as you can see, even without any other breakout hits, a lot of small new shows, a lot of these are in their 1st or 2nd week on the service, are, as I said, keeping viewers from churning. Over on iTunes, yes, as you can see, Barbie is Queen, having just hit. We'll see how long she can stay up there. While horror sensation Talk to Me also just hit digital and is also doing very well. The reason it's not #2 is that No Hard Feelings just dropped to a lower price point for rental. It starts out at about a $20 rental, but eventually hits a $6 rental because, as you can see, even here, price point is a very important factor. Liam Neeson's latest also just hit digital and has found an audience, while surprisingly, Strays is still in the top 10 in its 2nd week. Considering what a box office bomb that movie was, you'd think it would have dropped out of the top 10 quite quickly, but it seems it's just that much of a digital streaming movie. Did you watch Strays? How was it? Now, last week, I said that it was a shame, and you could see, again, talking about the new trends that we've been discussing, that the whole top 10 on iTunes is recent theatrical releases. But in the comments, one of you was like, what else do you think it would be, Grace? Come on, that's not a problem. But here's the thing. Up until recently, thanks to sales and iTunes editorial team spotlighting older films on the front page, you would see older films in the top 10 as audiences rediscovered, or in some cases discovered, those older movies. And as I said, that the interest and knowledge of older film is slipping away, and that's a real shame. For instance, shouldn't the best fall movie ever made, When Harry Met Sally, be in the top 10 here? Or how about You've Got Mail? I've been watching When Harry Met Sally I started during the pandemic. I revisited the movie, and now I watch it every fall season, and I've added You've Got Mail to the rotation as well, which is actually pretty good. I think Ted Lasso actually recently spotlighted it too. These are good evergreen movies. But I don't have to buy them on iTunes because you know what? They're both on Max, and I added them to my watch list at no extra cost. But you can see, again, Hollywood underselling itself. As for this coming week, in theaters, The Expendables 4 hopes to have enough razzle-dazzle to get you to go to your local theater. Oh, I don't know about that. That seems like a real streamer to me. While Dumb Money will expand to some more theaters before going fully wide the weekend after. As for streaming movies, on Friday, Netflix has a new Spy Kids film with Zachary Levi starring. We'll see if he has indeed made himself toxic. Would Zachary Levi keep you from watching the new Spy Kids? I think that audience might not be into the Zachary Levi drama, quite frankly. I think that's going to skew very family, very kid, with very little adult crossover. While Hulu has sci-fi movie No One Will Save You, starring Caitlin Dever, from Booksmart, and a lot of really great content, actually. You'd think she'd be a bigger name at this point. All right, so anyway, and on Peacock, John Wick prequel The Continental drops the first of 3 movie-length episodes, which will come out weekly. Then with regular shows, on Wednesday, Apple TV kicks off The Supermodels, a docuseries about the rise of the biggest supermodels of all time. We're talking Naomi Campbell, Cindy Crawford, Linda Evangelista, and Christy Turlington, who all came up together in the 1980s. It's interesting. Who killed the supermodel? Actresses. It started to be that actresses and singers who would represent fashion and jewelry and brands and be on covers of magazines, whereas it used to be models, they had that space to themselves. But that's actually pretty interesting. I don't know if they're going to talk about the fall of the supermodel, but they are going to talk about the rise. The D'Amelio Show returns on Hulu. Netflix has a second docuseries about the Murdaugh murders. An American Horror Story returns with Kim Kardashian. I sure hope Emma Roberts is getting paid a lot to carry this whole season on her shoulders. On Thursday, Netflix drops the final season of Sex Education, while Max has the first 4 episodes of Young Love, which is based on the Oscar-winning short Hair Love. While on Friday, Apple TV has the first 3 episodes of Still Up, and Netflix has another South Korean show, this time Western, Song of the Bandits. So that's this week's movie math. What have you been watching? What do you plan to watch? And do you see a way out of this mess with Hollywood currently underselling itself? Share your thoughts down below, subscribe today, and of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.